Okay, Professor Anton, thanks for your, really well put together, visually and I think well thought out and thought-provoking video that you've just posted. It was great. I think I've watched it probably maybe three or four times now. So I just wanted to do a quick rapid fire, a shot, some shots out there for some food for thought. Um, the first that I'll bring up here is I want to comment on this idea that words are not things. They're not things in time and space. Uh, yeah, I mean I agree. Words are definitely not things in time and space. I mean they cannot be literally. I mean according to the principle of the principle of sufficient reason. Uh, I mean the only reason that we find that claim so amazing is because we are essentially a visual, tactile. I mean, vision and touch go together. So we are a visual, tactile, uh, based. I don't want to say culture, but the words we use. We say, "Oh, I see what you're saying." I mean, why would you say I see what you're saying? Why wouldn't you say I hear what you're saying? Or and or someone will say, "Oh, see if you can discern what I'm, the meaning of this." I mean, discern is it comes from sight, and of course this was written on by Ong, O-N-G. Anyway, so we are definitely I mean, as far as I see it, I guess I'll agree with Ong. He says that evolutionarily, vision and touch were the most fit senses, I guess you could say, and that I mean, and in principle, as Merleau-Ponty said, has noticed, in principle, anything that you can see, you can touch in principle. So they go together really well, kind of like technology and capitalism. I mean, they just like one, it's like you see something and touching and seeing, and they're complementing each other. So the only reason that we find the notion that uh, any idea or concept thing anything you can I have to say the word thing. That's the thing. I'm gonna go ahead and say it, even though it's contradictory. Anything that you can refer to it amazes us when we say that it's not a thing in time and space because we think everything is in time and space when in fact only vision and touch give us the data uh, required for um, not for space and time but for objects in space and time, which has to do with causal relations. So um, I mean the in reality the relationship between what is given, what the senses that are amenable to objectification as presenting objects in space and time are outnumbered. There's an asymmetry between those which do not. Taste by itself, hearing by itself, smell by itself. These three senses, it's 3 to 2 here. Uh, you can never get objects out of them because if you here I'll read from from Arthur Schopenhauer's essay on the fourfold root of the principle of sufficient reason, where he says that well, yeah, I gotta find it. See, I think it's 21. Okay, he says remember he's talking about objective perception meaning perception of objects, just in the everyday sense. And he's saying, let's see, I'm trying to warn you here. Uh, and for him, um, objects always refer to causes, and he thinks that space and time and causality are we have an a priori understanding. The understanding, the intellect has a priori knowledge of time, space, and causality. The most primitive form of causality, and it's actually amenable to things like Varela's autopoiesis. But anyway, um, he says objective perception makes use, properly speaking, of only two senses, touch and sight. These alone supply the data upon which, as its basis, the understanding constructs the objective world by the process just described. The three other senses, which are smell, taste, and audal perception or hearing, the three or oral perception, the three other senses remain on the whole subjective, for their sensations, while pointing to an external cause, still contain no data by which its relations in space can be determined. Now, space is the form of all perception, i.e., of that apprehension in which alone objects can, properly speaking, present themselves. Therefore, those other three senses can no doubt serve to announce the presence of objects we already know in some other way, but no construction in space, consequently no objective perception, can possibly be founded on their data. A rose cannot be constructed from its perfume, and a blind man may hear music all his life without having the slightest objective representation of either of the musicians or of the instruments or of the vibrations of the air. On the other hand, the sense of hearing is of great value as a medium for language, and through this it is the sense of reason. It is also valuable as a medium for music, which is the only way in which we comprehend numerical relations, not only in abstracto, but directly in concreto. A musical sound or note, however, gives no clue to spatial relations. Therefore, it never helps to bring the nature of its cause nearer to us. We stop short at it, so that it is no datum for the understanding in its construction of the objective world. The sensations of touch and sight alone are such data. Therefore, a blind man without either hands or feet, while able to construct space for himself a priori in all its regularity, would nevertheless acquire but a very vague representation of the objective world. Right, so that was just my first point, is just that, you know, when we say that words are not things in time and space, we're putting this idea of, you know, something not being in time and space on a pedestal, when in fact there's an asymmetry between the three senses, which are not objectifiable, and the two, vision and touch, which are, uh, you know, because they're more important to us, I guess, you know. And you know, I mean, I think, even though I think, as Ong says, you know, back in the day, a couple hundred years ago, if you were blind, it was much less difficult to adapt than people who were deaf, because speech is so important. Whereas you can learn your way around, if you know, if you can speak, you have a much easier time than if you can just see but you can't hear. Okay, so that was the first point. No sound or smell or taste by itself is an object in space and time. Words are different because they are principles of repeatability, like Burke said. Okay, real quick then. Second point. If we say something is going to happen or not, then that means that it is possible. So we say, oh, well, this is going to happen or not. It's possible. So possible means you have all these possibilities, all these things that could happen. But the next question is, where does impossible come from? I mean, having a bunch of possibilities does not yet bring up the notion of impossibility. You see what I'm saying? You have all these positive possibilities, and all of a sudden it's like impossibility is like nothing squared. You know, so that's another thing to think about. You know, so if we're going to make a big deal of nothing, you know, impossibility is like twice as crazy. Okay, and then the third thing is that when you say nothing, it's the same thing as saying being, insofar as you would say like pure being. Pure being has no determinateness, no characteristics, and so when you say pure being, you're really saying nothing. So nothing and pure being are really the same. For more on that, see my next video that I'll be speaking about.